Lee Howell, Head of Programming at the World Economic Forum. Can you tell us a bit more about the theme of the annual meeting 2010?
The theme has two dimensions. The first dimension is a call to action, improve the state of the world. And then we focus on rethink, redesign, and rebuild. The context for that is that this is going to be the 40th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Our mission statement is improving the state of the world, and I think there's no better time to focus on that mission statement than in 2010. Hence, the improve the state of the world will be sort of the call to action to our stakeholders. In that context, though, to improve the state of the world, we think it's really premised around the three R's. We really need to focus on rethinking around some of the key critical issues. Through that rethinking exercise, to redesign the institutions and mechanisms that will help us address those issues. And lastly, to get buy-in for that redesign, you have to rebuild. And by that, we mean to rebuild the trust and rebuild really the sense of community that's necessary to fulfill any kind of redesign effort to remedy some of the challenges facing the world today.
You say that this is an historical annual meeting of the World Economic Forum. Can you just give some sense of objectives or outcomes or vision for how you see the discussions going over the course of the 5 days?
Sure. It's historic because I think, let's actually take a step back. It was 2 years ago at the annual meeting 2008 where we had two special messages delivered. One was from Dr. Pachauri of the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, talking about really the need to address climate change. The other special message in 2008 was from President Karzai of Afghanistan. Fast forward to today, clearly climate change is an issue that's unresolved and requires a lot of focus and work from the international community. Likewise, Afghanistan. So there's a lot of unfinished business. But I think what's really most important at this stage is really the Great Recession that we've just come through. It was last year that we were really trying to understand what led to the financial crisis. 1 year later, we've gone through a very deep global recession, what we've called the Great Recession. And what's it going, what will the world be like coming out of this recession is very important, and I think very on top of the minds of everyone. Particularly what will be the shape of the recovery. I think there's a real deep concern about the fact that some of the prescriptions to deal with the financial crisis, though it stabilized the global economy, may present challenges in the future, particularly, for example, the massive stimulus that was put forth, the debt burden that's there, the big debt overhang. The fact that there may be a recovery, but it may be a jobless recovery in the sense that some of the industries that were suffering from many of not only the cyclical but the structural challenges that the financial crisis surfaced, they may not get back to where they were in terms of their employment and their productivity. And at the same time, we shouldn't look at this as purely on the downside. Obviously, there's upside in the sense that new industries, a new focus, particularly around sustainability and the low-carbon economy, may create the necessary and needed jobs of the future. But it's all about that uncertainty and the fact that that uncertainty is linked to how interdependent and complex the world is. And that, of course, leads us to rethink about how we're approaching each of these issues in isolation, but really to say, how do we look at it in a broader context and understand how they interconnect? The redesign element, though, is the fact that most of the institutions today are not fit for purpose to deal with many of these challenges. And in fact, the financial crisis surfaced that there really isn't a systemic risk regulator that can look at this issue globally. We know that there are other issues around, you can be a pandemic threat, or it could be around the issues of obviously climate change, where there is no one organizing global body to deal with it. So we're starting to see shifts. One of the major shifts in Davos that will be a focus will be the shift from the G7, G8 constellation of powers to the G20. They've had now two historical summits in London and Pittsburgh, but there's a lot of unfinished business around the G20, primarily around the economic issues. So I think Davos, clearly the focus will be on that unfinished business and understanding the shift in governance from, let's say, the G7, G8 world to the G20. And the G20 is 85% of the global economy, so obviously these are the right people, but how will they work and coalesce and get around these issues? And that's a big redesign question. And obviously, part of that is rebuilding the trust among those stakeholders. And so that's really, in a way, the three R's and how it'll play out into the program. But I think top of mind will be clearly how are we getting out of the Great Recession? What are the other global issues that need to be addressed that we can't let be left unaddressed? because obviously by not addressing them, we may go back to another crisis and we may start all over again and get to a W-shaped recovery where we're obviously hoping for a V-shaped recovery. So those are the many issues that will challenge. And obviously in this day and age, there's things around security, around not only Afghanistan, but the nuclear non-proliferation treaty that will be reviewed next year. Those are a number of global issues that we want to tackle, but I think first and foremost we'll be looking at the unfinished business of the G20.
So there in Davos are world leaders representing all sectors of society, culture, media, politics, the economy. What's going to be new in terms of sessions and how these leaders actually come together and discuss and tackle these issues?
Well, I think what will be, it doesn't sound new, but I think the emphasis on how. I think there will be a number of sessions that are going to focus on how do you do this or that. I'll give you a clear example. I'm optimistic that at least out of the Copenhagen discussions, they will have obviously some principles to go forward, but there still will not be a concrete agreement. So how do you do that? How do you achieve a real successor treaty to the Kyoto Protocols? To do that, a how question is not about having a discussion in a panel and having people telling you what to do, more or less, or why to do it. I think what's important is to have those stakeholders around the table and saying, how do we work this out? And that requires sessions that are in a new environment. So we're creating a number of ideas labs where it's very interactive, where we have people, it's very participatory, but more importantly, it's outcome oriented. So I think what will be different will be this year in our 40th annual meeting, we'll be focusing on a lot of issues around how do you get things done. And that does require rethinking, it does require redesigning, it does require rebuilding. And to improve the state of the world, it's really about how do you do it now. I think the whys, there's still a lot of issues that we have to build awareness around, but I think generally the consensus around the world is we do need to do something dramatically and urgently all around these global issues. So I think that's covered. The what to do, that we are able to bring to 2,000 leaders. We have global agenda councils today with experts contributing their time and effort around these challenges. That network is now over 1,000 experts. The what to do, I think we really have we're an opportunity to tap into a great inventory of great ideas and proposals. But why and the what really doesn't get to the question of how. And how can only happen by convening the leaders around an agenda, and getting them to sort of roll up their sleeves and discuss what they're going to do, both individually but also collectively to address the issue. And that is really why convening is really a demonstration of leadership, because you have to get these people in the room to figure out how to get things done.